All right, pre-algebra, we are moving into module 1, our real numbers module. And we're going to start with the first part of our lesson about fractions and decimals. In order to be successful today, we should be able to rewrite rational numbers and decimals. That includes converting fractions to decimals, converting decimals to fractions, and we're going to learn the difference between repeating and terminating decimals. And again, you should be following along in your guided notes. Here we go. So when we talk about converting fractions and decimals, we know that values can be represented in several ways. So for example, a fraction can also be represented as a decimal or vice versa. To convert a fraction to a decimal, we need to divide the numerator, that's the top part of the fraction, numerator is the top, by the denominator. And remember, the denominator is the bottom part of the fraction. So for example, if we had the fraction 3/5, that means we are going to be dividing 3 by 5. And if we were going to do long division, which we will, it would start out like this: 3 divided by 5. To convert a decimal to a fraction, we're going to put the decimal over 1 and then multiply the numerator and denominator by 10 until there is no longer a decimal in the numerator. Then we would go through and we would simplify the fraction. So let me show you what that looks like. Let's say I have the decimal 0.25. Well, I'm going to put that decimal over 1, and then we are going to multiply both the top and the bottom of this fraction by 10 until the decimal is no longer there. So when we multiply 0.25 by 10, that means we're moving the decimal place 1 to the right. So this would become 2.5 over 10, and we're going to have to multiply one more time by 10 until we get 25 over 100, and from there we would reduce that fraction. Another way to do this is we need to take a look at the decimal places. So let's say we're using 0.25 again, and actually let me use a different color for that. Let's say we are using the decimal 0.25. What I want to do to write this as a fraction is I want to look at the last decimal place that I see. This is the second place over from the decimal, which means it's in the hundredths place. This decimal is actually 25 hundredths. So we can just write the decimal like so, and then of course reduce. Let's try this out. Okay, types of decimals. So and this is where we're going to learn about repeating versus terminating decimals. If a fraction converts into a decimal that eventually stops, keyword stops, we are going to call that decimal a terminating decimal. If you've ever heard of the film franchise, The Terminator, Terminator ends things. So this decimal is going to end. If the decimal ends, it is a terminating decimal. Kind of like in our previous example, 0.25, or it could be 1.34. It doesn't have to be less than 1. It could be any decimal that eventually ends. Otherwise, if a fraction converts into a decimal with a repeating block, we're going to call it a repeating decimal. And I'm sure you've seen some examples of this before. So this would be like 1.56 repeating. and there's a bar called a repetan over the top of the 5 and 6 digits. And so if you expand this out, it becomes 1.565656, on and on forever. So wherever the repeating bar is over, that sequence repeats. So let's try converting fractions to decimals. So first we're going to take a look at number 2. I am skipping around here. Let's look at number 2, and the fraction is 1/16. And what we want to do is we want to think of this as 1 divided by 16. So here we are, 1 divided by 16, and we're going to have to use some long division skills here. Now 16 cannot go into 1, so I'm going to add a decimal inside my dividing box. And I'm also going to line up my answer section with that same decimal, because I know 16 does not go into 1. So now let's add a 0. 16 still does not go into 10, so we're going to add another 0. Let's go again. 16 does go into 100. And off the top of my head, 16 goes into 100 6 times. 16 times 6 is 96. We're going to subtract 100 minus 96 is 4. We're going to add another 0, bring it down to our remainder, and it becomes 40. 16 goes into 40 twice. 16 times 2 is 32. 40 minus 32 is 8. Add another 0, drop it down to the remainder. 16 goes into 80 exactly 5 times. 16 times 5 is 80. And we subtract, there is no remainder left. So our decimal is 0.0625. And this is a terminating decimal because we didn't have any remainder at the end of our division. 1/16 as a decimal is 0.0625. Let's try another example. We have 5/6. So this means 5 divided by 6. 5 divided by 6. 6 cannot go into 5 at all. We're going to add a decimal. And let's add another 0. 6 does go into 50. 6 goes into 50 8 times. 6 times 8 is 48. And when we subtract, we get 2. Add another 0. Bring it down to the remainder. 6 goes into 23 times. 6 times 3 is 18. Add another 0, bring it down. I think I'm starting to see a pattern here. 6 goes into 23 times. 6 times 3 is 18. And we subtract, and we get another 2. If we kept adding zeros and bringing them down to the remainder, this pattern would repeat over and over and over again. So this decimal is 0.83 repeating. Now notice the repeating bar is only over the 3. That's because the 3 is the only number that repeats. The 8 stops. So this is a repeating decimal, 0.83 repeating, and the 3's repeat infinitely. If you would like additional practice, and I highly recommend this, there's problems 1, 4, 5, and 6 for you to practice. Now let's convert decimals to fractions. So I've left the place value chart just as a reminder to us. And we have the decimal 0.275. So we can go one of two ways here. We can write this decimal as a fraction over 1 and then multiply by 10 until the decimal is gone. But I'm going to go the faster way. And I'm going to take a look at the last place I see in this decimal. This is the third place over from the decimal, and when I look at that, that's the thousandths place. So this would be 275 over 1,000, 275 thousandths. And now from here we can simplify. And when we simplify, let's see, what number goes into both 275 and 1,000? I think 25 goes into both of those numbers. So I'm going to divide the top and the bottom by 25. 275 divided by 25 is 11. And 1,000 divided by 25 is 40. So 11 over 40. Can this reduce any further? I don't think so. If you were practicing this on your own and you only divided by 5 the first time to reduce, you're going to have to reduce again. It was lucky for me to choose 25, so this is my simplified answer. And again, of course, you can reduce until the numbers are no longer have common factors. Let's try one more. This one is 8.12. When we write this as our final answer, this is going to be 8 and something over something. This is going to be a mixed number. So instead of using the 8 right now, I'm only going to focus on the 0.12. And again, I'm going to look at the decimal value, the last decimal value that I see. This is in the hundredths place. So this 0.12 would be 12 hundredths. 12 and 100 are both even numbers. These are going to reduce. Let's just start by dividing by 2 on the top and the bottom. And I get 12 divided by 2 is 6. 100 divided by 2 is 50. This can still reduce. And of course, they're both even numbers, so I'm going to divide by 2 again. And I get 3 over 25. And from what I know, 3 and 25 do not have common factors. This is a reduced fraction. So our mixed number at the very end would be 8, and then our fraction here, and 3 25ths. That is our final answer. And if you would like to practice converting decimals to fractions, again, very much recommend doing so. Those problems are 7, 10, 11, and 12 in your notes. And I've also included additional practice at the end. So that was part 1 of our lesson. So again, make sure you're trying out the additional practice problems. Check your answers with my filled-in notes. You can find these in the content library in our Module 1 notes section. And of course, ask for support in the Math Help Desk if needed. Thank you for watching again.